guys, Jay here. Welcome to Models Memories Weekly, episode 136. Models Memories is a show about nothing and is filmed in front of a live studio audience. This is a show where I talk about my painting, modeling, and wargaming experiences from the week. Now you might be thinking to yourself, Jay, you put out 3 videos a week. How could I possibly have more to say? Well, I do, and here goes. This week, I had my very first games of Tabletop Simulator. Games Workshop came out with some Christmas boxes, but first. Displate is a one-of-a-kind metal poster, a sturdy, magnet-mounted canvas that will last a lifetime. Displate has both branded and original artwork with over 1 million designs available to collect, and they've just begun a collaboration with Games Workshop so you can find official designs from Warhammer 40k. They've got Ultramarines, they got Dark Angels, they got White Scars, and because of the magnets, you don't have to worry about always having the same thing on display. And if somehow 40k is not your thing, they also have artwork from D&D, World of Warcraft, Elden Ring, and plenty of other games and movies. Each Displate is a high-quality design printed on metal and hand-signed by their master of production. It couldn't be quicker, easier, or safer to attach these to your walls. Give the spot a wipe, stick down the protective leaf, place the magnet, and stick down your Displate. Displate delivers its products worldwide in 4 to 5 business days. They're a great alternative to paper posters, and they won't leave marks on your walls. They are also eco-friendly. For every design sold, they are committed to planting 1 tree. Use the link in the description below. The discount will be applied automatically at checkout. Or use code EONS at checkout to get 20% off of 1 or 2 Displates and 30% off of 3 or more. Tabletop Simulator is something I have always known is out there in the background and that people are playing at Warhammer 40k to it. I watch tabletop YouTubers who always talk in tactics and they talk about all these games they played in Tabletop Simulator, and I never really dived into it. Mostly because I'm not that good at video games, and so it's better if I play single player video games so I can really take my time and die like 10 trillion times before even beating the tutorial, and so I don't want to like slow people down. But also because Tabletop Simulator just feels kind of wrong. Like tabletop war games they're almost objectively bad games. Like video games are perfect. The computer does all the work for you. You just sit down and it's like drugs. You're just immediately having a ton of fun. Tabletop war games are very different. They're great in their own way. Obviously, I have a soft spot for tabletop war games, but it involves a lot painting, building, modeling, figuring out the rules, figuring out what the rules actually mean, how to set up a board, what kind of terrain works well, getting other people to actually play the game with you, and they have to go through this whole list of figuring every single thing out, knowing how rules interactions work. All of this stuff combined adds up to tabletop wargaming, and it's a lot of work. And it's great for the right crowd. Tabletop wargaming is very interesting, and it's weird to turn it into a computer game. And I've played some tabletop war games as computer games because Games Workshop has had some of their games ported over to the computer. I'm thinking Space Hulk. I have played every single mission many times in Space Hulk because there's a video game that's just a direct port of the tabletop game into digital. Ooh, and it's really dangerous because in the video game, it's a perfect recreation down to the character models, but they added an undo button that works on the dice rolls, and it's really hard to, roll your dice, and it's like, I'm firing my assault cannon at those gene stealers. 4 dice, I need a 6, and you don't get any 6s, and you're like, one of those dice should have been a 6, and your mouse starts to cursor over to the undo button, and you're like, I shouldn't do it. I should play it where the dice lies, but nobody's watching. I'm playing all by myself. Click, click, and then all of a sudden you get to try again, and then you do it like 4 more times, and you still don't get any 6s, but it does sort of ruin tabletop wargaming. At least I thought it did. That was just my logic behind it of like, I don't want to mess with Tabletop Simulator. I don't want to figure it all out. I also had to install mods, and I don't know how computers work. And so it took like a week to find all the mods and to put them into the right folders on my computer. But I got Tabletop Simulator work, and I got everything I needed, and it's okay. It's just okay. It is fun to be able to get games done relatively quickly because the computer is handling a lot of things. The computer does the measuring for you. You can figure out how to get auras to generate so that you can see how far certain attacks and certain bonuses get cast out. It is fun to roll digital dice. The computer can actually do that completely for you, where you just click a button and the dice results just appear to you, but I kind of like picking up the dice and hitting like roll 100 times so that the dice get jumbled up and then toss them across the digital table and watch them roll. I actually find that it feels pretty satisfying to just really get a good roll going with your computer mouse. But it's okay, I played Sean. He absolutely tabled me a few times, but I didn't have the terrain perfectly figured out. Now I do. So I'm hoping that eventually I will be able to beat Sean in Tabletop Simulator and in real life. Let me know in the comments below what you think of Tabletop Simulator or just digital versions of war games, because it does feel weird. I sometimes feel this when I play with unpainted models of like, well, now what's the point of even painting them? I'm already playing with these models. And I've definitely had experiences where I'm playing with unpainted models and I'm like, oh, this unit stinks. So maybe it doesn't need to get painted right now. Maybe I push it further across the painting desk and I work on other things. And Tabletop Simulator feels a little bit the same way. Like, I've played 2 different lists in Tabletop Simulator. One that's a recreation of the army that I have, and then one that's just other stuff. Like, it's almost completely stuff I don't own. And it does get me a little excited, like, oh, maybe I should collect those models, but it also just makes me think, maybe that's my Tabletop Simulator list, and it doesn't correspond with actual reality. I mean, in Tabletop Simulator, the models are already painted and ready to rock and roll. Oh, and speaking of models, I downloaded the most popular mod pack for Warhammer 40k 10th edition, and it gives you a giant collection of miniatures that people have made in the game. A lot of them are like STLs that have been colorized, or just like Baby's First Blender projects or rips from Dawn of War. But some of them are actually, I don't know how they make them, but they must take 360-degree pictures of miniatures. I see a lot of them from the Games Workshop web store that have been turned into Tabletop Simulator models. And some of them are my models. They're a bunch of my chaplains are in Tabletop Simulator. Like, it's I had no idea this happened or this existed, but some legend must have taken the 360 spinnies at the end of my videos when I'm showing off the model and used that data to turn those models into the in-game files. And it was amazing. I actually played with my Terminator chaplain. It was literally my model. It was so cool. And this is great. It's just out there in the world. People have been playing with my chaplains, and that is the coolest thing ever. If anybody knows or is the person who made that happen, reach out, because that is really, really cool. Tabletop Simulator is a very good, somewhat like perfect recreation of Warhammer 40k. You just talk with your buddy over Discord and you move the dice around. I didn't figure out how to get all of like the data into the game or the actual rules, so I actually had all of my paper rule books and my iPad sitting next to me on the computer, which is kind of fun to reference physical media and then transfer that to the digital, like in the moment. It was kind of a weird system, but Tabletop Simulator does work, and I do plan to get many, many more games in, because now I can actually get games in the evenings as opposed to just on the weekends. And I gotta win in 40k at some point. It's getting absolutely ridiculous. Really, maybe I should make Sean play something that's not Parking Lot Imperial Guard with 4 Demolisher cannons that can just seemingly wreck anything in the game, because boy, Imperial Guard into Space Marines does seem like a little bit of an uphill matchup. It's kind of interesting looking at the meta watch and how all of the different armies break out. I would love to know a little bit more information of like how many games, what were the matchups, because I'm sure it's just what are people playing. It's not a perfect breakdown of this data was compiled based on every army, 10 games versus every single other army in the game. Like, who knows if the Gene Stealer Call data isn't just like 4 people who all played against Eldar. And so maybe they're a little better or a little worse than they would be if you compared them to Imperial Guard or Sisters of Battle. This doesn't feel like quite enough information, and it doesn't always feel like it corresponds with reality. Like, I've always heard that it's hard to rely on that sort of data for Space Marines because like half of all people are playing Space Marines. So sometimes you just get tons of top-notch players all playing Space Marines and they really bounce up higher than they should in the rankings. Or sometimes you just get a lot of new people playing them, and so their scores are actually way lower than they should be. I don't know. All I know is I just can't seem to make my Black Templar work, but I'm getting there. I'm 25 games of Warhammer 40k in, and yet to score over like 30 points, or win, or not be tabled, but I'm working on it, and I'm working real hard on it. But speaking of working real hard on things, I have been getting my Space Marine vehicles all ready to rock and roll. I've been getting some of the new Primaris vehicles, and I've been building perhaps one of the biggest vehicles that exists in all of Warhammer 40k. I guess you'll just have to stay tuned and find out. But the new Primaris vehicles, when they dropped, I think along with a lot of people, or at least a lot of very vocal people, didn't love the floaty tanks. I've built 2 Impulsors and 1 Repulsor, which also awful names because Impulsor and Repulsor sound like the exact same thing and they're 2 very different units. But now that I have them in person, they're not bad. They're not bad. I actually like them a lot. I like the Impulsor more than the Rhino. The Rhino is classic and all the different variants of the Rhinos are very fun, but the Impulsor just looks really cool in person. It is also kind of a box, and I think I probably would have preferred tracks or wheels to floaty tank. Although I love in Star Wars, the droids are my favorite, and a lot of the droid vehicles are floaty vehicles that just sort of hover slightly over the ground, but still move slowly for some reason. And so I kind of dig it, because every time I see that repulsor just hovering like an inch off the base, I just think of Jar Jar and Qui-Gon falling down in the MTT droid transport ship, just slowly driving over them, but not noticing the Jedi that they're actually actively looking for. It is kind of cool. I'm definitely coming around to the Primaris a lot. I've always liked the Primaris infantry. I think they look great. I think that they are super great reimaginings of the classic Space Marines. I like the Mark 10 helmet. I do like the old Screamer pattern helmet, but and I wouldn't mind if there was a few different helmets for the Primaris Marines. We see them in the Stern Guard Veterans kit, or the Primaris Stern Guard Veteran kit, that they have a couple of helmets. I don't know if there's a beaky, but there's definitely an old Screamer Darth Vader face helmet in there. And so I have seen people take the Primaris helmet and kind of fill in their little cat whiskers, and it does make it a little bit more of like a knightly face, which it is already a knightly face, kind of based on the Mark IV armor. But the Primaris vehicles, I'm definitely coming around to. I don't know if I'll be saying the same thing if I ever get some Repulsor ATVs or some Primaris ATVs, because boy, the ATV, it totally feels like if somebody wanted to port the Space Marines into Mario Kart, then that would be what the Primaris Space Marines would be driving, is the ATV. It's a little bit rough. And it turns out that the new Storm Speeder model is really, really good in game, like almost a necessity. Man, I don't like the flying one. I don't really love the old one either, the Land Speeder, but the new one, man, it is a boot. It's a box of tissues flying through the air. It's got these tiny, stubby little wings. It's got Captain Tinnitus up top in the gunner's seat, just his little tiny gopher head sticking out like Diglett the Pokemon in between either 2 giant missile launchers or 2 giant guns. It looks pretty darn ridiculous. I'm thinking about how I could convert or kit bash one together that feels a little bit more Templars-y and looks a little bit better. I actually have a Storm Talon gunship that I never take in game because it's just kind of an unit and kind of an model in my opinion. It's just like a weird little baby jet fighter thing for the Space Marines. It's about the right size though. I think maybe I'll just rebase that guy and use that in games. Or the Dark Angels. I forget what it's called, but the Dark Angels version of the Storm Talon that has those giant gothic wings with the eagle impressions on them, that model is pretty sick. I wonder if there's something I can do with that. Or just the Dark Angel Storm Speeder that's kind of got like the double-seater compartment with the giant plasma gun in the back. I mean, I wouldn't use the giant plasma gun in the back because it's not an option in the kit for war gear, but that model is really, really cool and decently gothic. A lot of the Space Marine stuff isn't actually very gothic. I guess it's grim dark in that it's sort of a combining of like World War I tanks and gear with classic historical ye olde knights. A little bit. The Space Marines are actually kind of weird in their design philosophy. And I definitely think the Primaris is kind of struggling between those two. A lot of the Black Templar stuff I think looks absolutely perfect. The Space Marine or Primaris Space Marine classic stuff is okay. A lot of it's decent. I really like Gravis armor. A lot of it is really weird. I still don't know how I feel about 10 normal Primaris dudes all holding the exact same Infernus flamethrower or Hellblaster plasma gun. But I have been really, really liking Primaris. And although it is kind of a cash grab and it is a little bit annoying that this whole, like, Space Marines are changing, it's kind of working out perfectly for me because I collected a Space Marine army 10 years ago and those models don't look good anymore and I didn't do a good job painting them. But now my skills have improved a lot and I feel like my army is starting to look like what I envision in my head. Although I would love to go back. I would love to go back to Little J putting together his first Black Templar because I remember I was super happy. Like the decals had bubbles under them and I'm like, yeah, it's on there straightish. And I would love to just be able to like, boom. Grimaldus. This is what Grimaldus is going to look like in 10 years. But you know what else is a fun thought? Every single year, Games Workshop comes out with Christmas battle boxes, just a bunch of kits thrown together and sold at a discount. Sometimes not the best discount, sometimes a pretty darn good discount. I think one of my biggest, fondest memories in Warhammer 40k was like my second year of collecting Warhammer models. I really wanted a Necron army, or I had a Necron army. It was almost entirely warriors, but I scrimped and I saved and I had like dog walking money and I got the Necron Christmas Battle Force from 2014, 13, and it was glorious. I had never seen so much plastic all in one go, and they have shown off some Age of Sigmar battle forces. Age of Sigmar got 4 big old boxes. They never quite get as much love and attention as Warhammer 40k, but these 4 boxes seem pretty cool. We got the Seraphon box full of all of the new kits. Ooh, and it also comes with the Chameleon Skinks from Warcry, which I actually have that box, and it's a really, really cool Warcry team, and I've been dying to put them together because they look like they're gonna be the perfect thing for Army Painter speed paints. We got some Boner Boys, the Ossiarch Bone Reapers, Chaos. I've never been a big fan of the Age of Sigmar Chaos. I'm not a big Chaos person in general, but at least in the 40k Chaos, they have guns. They have guns and like lightning claws and power fists. The Age of Sigmar Chaos is, I mean, they're not normal dudes. They're normal dudes who are slightly spiky. And the Soul Blop Bleep Blop, the Soul Blight Grave Lords, the double named because they're the Soul Blight and they're also the Grave Lords. These boxes seem pretty cool. They feel a little lighter than last year's boxes, but I think that's just because last year the Ossiarch Bone Reaper box had a lot more infantry in it, and there was a Skaven box that just came with a buttload of clan rats. But the vampires. Of all, I usually like the good guy factions, but the vampires are really cool. They're not what I want them to be though, because they have vampires, and you got the super, super cool, like half bat, half vampire lady centaur model. That is just the weirdest thing, and I absolutely love it. But the skeletons, the death rattle skeletons are just, I don't want normal zombie dudes in with my vampires. I want each vampire. My perfect vampire army in Age of Sigmar would be essentially like Custodes in 40k. I want each vampire to be just an unstoppable, undead monstrosity that can move in the blink of an eye, can turn into a giant evil bat, is afraid of sunlight, can't be seen in mirrors, has just a big, weird Victorian clothing with ruffles. Like, I want every single vampire to be a problem. But it seems a little bit more like the vampires are just pretty darn good, but there's a lot of stuff in Age of Sigmar that's pretty darn good. And then you just have a bunch of death rattle skeletons because you need just a pleb trooper. But I don't want pleb troopers. I want like just a couple of units on the board, but they're all vampires. Like, did anybody see Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter? Not the greatest movie of all time, although it's a lot of fun. And the ending is fantastic, where old man Honest Abe is fighting vampires on top of a train with an axe. It's kind of glorious. Like, that's kind of what I imagine, is just vampires are unstoppable, where death rattle skeletons feel very stoppable. I mean, they're just They're just like the pleb mummies from like the Brendan Fraser mummy movies where they died a bullet somehow. It's just kind of lame. In my perfect world, your army of vampires would be like 20 vampires, maybe. That even might be pushing it. Maybe 20 vampires, and I'll also accept the giant monstrous bats and zombie hounds, because I think werewolves are also can be part of the mix. You can throw those guys in, no problem. Werewolves are still a problem. Like, they're a big problem. They're very, very dangerous and very real, just like vampires are. So this box has some death rattle skeletons. And that's just kind of what it made me think of, because I'm like, ooh, I could see myself painting up some vampires and having a really good time with Age of Sigmar. But then it's like, but then you just need a whole bunch of stuff. A whole bunch of stuff that's not vampires. And just the bubble bursts, and I'm like, I'll just have my Stormcast Eternal army and my Sylvaneth army. I do like the Sylvaneth a lot. The trees. I like being an evil Lorax, commanding the trees to fight back. And there's so many lovely little stories from the lore of they don't really care about like non-plant things. Like if you're just walking through the woods, they're mad at you because you're stepping on the grass. And you're murdering that grass. So they feel very, very okay with murdering you. And it's just lovely. I really like the Sylvaneth. They're a lot of fun. These boxes all seem pretty darn good. They'd be a nice start to an army. I do like the look of the Boner Boys. I think, not to be mean, but I think that the Boner Boys look cooler than the old Egyptian Tomb Kings. The Tomb Kings had some great models. The Necrosphinx, the little Anubis guys, but other than that, it's very Jason and the Argonauts, where the Boner Boys have a look. And that look is weird golems made of bones. And the name, the Boner Boys. I was surprised when Games Workshop officially titled them that, but it rolls off the tongue. It's great, almost as great as our Patreon. Over there, we have a brand new STL terrain set every single month, and this month we have Orc Vehicles. We got grot tanks, we got trucks, we got war rigs, and we have grot riggers for decoration. We also make extra episodes of Eon's Battle where we take a look at our viewers' miniatures and give some ideas and critiques of how to improve their painting, and we have a tier where you can get your name on one of my Black Templars, and you can join the crusade. And speaking of that crusade, I have so much painting to do to add to that crusade, although now I'm feeling like I might not need to paint as quickly because I'm playing so many of my games in Tabletop Simulator where the models are already painted. Thanks for watching.